He lives here.
Be seated, please. Muzaffar, how are you?
Very well.
Fine?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, a lot better.
Yesterday you delivered a very good speech.
Thank you.
MashaAllah.
Thank you. Oh, you know about it?
Yes, of course. I was so happy to learn that it was very well received and created a good impression on. Huh?
It was very nice.
Thank you.
Right?
Jazakallah.
How are you? Right? Yes. Shall we start straight away?
Sir, today we have a small group, Brother Muzaffar Clark and Clem Edward, you know both of them.
Yes.
And we have the guest lady, Dr. Hesler from
Dr.
Bournemouth.
Hesler, yes,
And they would like to ask certain
yes,
questions.
most
Yes,
certainly,
please.
Hazur, there's a question from abroad. The questioner refers to the tradition that during Ramadan the gates of heaven are opened and the
Open,
gates
right.
of hell are closed and the Satans are changed. Does this refer to the people who are keeping the fast, or is it more
You
universal?
see, this is a hadith which I was going to take up during my next sermon, inshallah.
Right.
At length and in depth I will try to explain everything about it. But just a cursory study would not make anybody understand anything from this.
Right.
Because if the gates of hell are closed, to whom? And if the gates of heaven are open, to whom? That's the question. Because it doesn't mention believers or those who are keeping fast. So it is just an expression, a sort of invitation to warn people against committing sins and continuing to commit sins during a month which is sacred. And if you do that, that's the message implied. Then, although ordinarily sins are, of course, never approved by Allah, but during certain days, if you commit sins, you are held doubly responsible. Things which one normally does, which have nothing of illegality about them, become doubly illegal at certain times, like during the day of Sabbath. Things which okay previously, before the Sabbath was imposed, were forbidden, although normally in daily life they are not forbidden at all. So I think that is the general spirit of this hadith. So at times when somebody is now let's first think in human terms, because the terms which I am going to use do not apply to God literally, of course. If you are in the presence of a king who is sitting in audience before the people, then to misbehave is doubly punishable. And if at that time you make advances, not make advances, but you try to present your case to him, which otherwise would be difficult for you to do because of the distances involved. If you are given a close audience and you are able to present your case well, naturally one expects that case to be heard sooner than through other sources. So this is a scenario which we understand as human beings in relation to the people whom we hold in awe, or who are great or whatever they are. In relation to us, when we are given access, when we are close, that is the time for us to benefit as best as we possibly can. So these are the two underlying messages. Because exactly like in human terms, it is said Allah comes closer to the earth.
Yes.
So that is why I am saying we better understand it in our own experience and our own terms. Otherwise Allah is everywhere. So what is the meaning of his getting closer? This means that he's more in, again the word mood does not apply to Allah, he has no moods. But only to make you understand in human terms, the Holy Prophet says that Allah comes closer to you and is ready to receive, ready to respond. So if you make a special effort during this month to get closer, then you are far more likely to be heard than otherwise. And this is the meaning of the door of heaven being wide open. Otherwise, these parables and metaphors should not be taken too literally, otherwise they won't mean anything. Right?
Thank you very much.
Please.
Are there any extra needs which our patients will have during Ramadan which we as doctors should be aware of in terms of fasting? Or
The patients?
yes.
I can't. What should be they aware of?
Will they be fasting, and will that affect their care?
You see, the patients, the Holy Quran very categorically says that the patients suffering the ill are exempt from fasting. Now, this is a very difficult question to answer in generalization. That is why Allah has not elaborated it in the Quran himself, because suffering or being a patient varies from person to person, and his own capability to take suffering and to respond to such situations as bodily ailments. Some people feel ill even at a slight indisposition, and they are built like that. Some can take even bigger ills, usually it's no problem, and small ailments don't bother them much. So it's the inner decision of the man himself. If he himself is convinced that he is ill and he can't keep the fast, so he must not fast in such a case, and he can exempt himself. No other authority, no outside authority can judge that. So those of the ulama who take it into their hands to decide whether somebody is ill or not, they play God, which they have no right. So if somebody makes false excuses and does not keep fast, what then? We are not to judge him. He will go to God, to whom everybody else will return. So there is no problem involved whatsoever. But unfortunately, in some parts of the Muslim society, like in Northwest Province, there is such rigidity in relation to the formal exercises of worship, etc., that the mullahs take it into their own hand to decide whether somebody is really permitted, really ill or not. And if somebody, for instance, is suffering heavily, he still would not would leave fast for the fear of the mullah's reaction. So it is a common experience there, particularly during the summer heat, that people pass out in public here and there, and as yet they are not given water until the mullah takes a pinch of dust, dry dust, opens his mouth and puts the dust in the mouth, and then spoons it out to see whether it was wet or not. If it is wet, if you see, he was just feigning, he is not really. So they must be very certain whether somebody is feigning or swooning. This is absurdity. This is really total annihilation of religious philosophy and religious values. So it's entirely up to anyone to decide for himself.
Another question on fasting, Hazur, is that a friend of mine asked, if he's thinking about going to Antarctica to do some geological work, and he's saying that, if I was a Muslim, which he's not, what would I do? Would I be allocated times of sunrise and sunset to the nearest town, or how did I go about attributing times for fasting at the North and South Pole, where?
Well, this issue has already been explained by me repeatedly, in fact, because And not because, but this, before the Ramadan, during the last sermon,
Yeah.
I spoke on this subject.
Oh,
In
maybe you
detail.
didn't see it.
You see, if Islam is really a religion for the whole mankind, and if Islam is really the religion for all times to come until the doomsday, then such questions must have been answered by Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if not in so many words by the Quran. Because the Quran is a book of principles, and it speaks in principle of everything, but it can't discuss everything in detail. So where the details are left out, there Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was guided by additional wahi, additional revelation as to what is meant by the Quran in that regard. So many times he explained things which otherwise would have always remained a moot questions for us, like this one. Once Allah told him through Jibreel that during the days of Dajjal, the Antichrist, the days will be not equal on the entire surface of the earth. They will differ. Some days, and most of them, would be the normal days of 24 hours. The others would vary up to a day of full 1 year. Everybody was amazed, because as yet the concept of how the earth is rounded and what happens to close to the pole or at the pole, they were unknown things by the society at that time. So the first question which arose was about the worship, about the prayers and fastings, etc. So one of the present inquired from Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if the day is lengthened to full 1 year, shall we be saying 5 prayers during the whole day, or should it be different? The answer was, of course not. You should judge your days according to the normal days you know, and measure your days, divide them into normal days. That is again 360 days per year.
365.
365, according to Islamic calendar, 355, not 60, 360. Because they were 10 years, Islamic calendar was 10 days shorter. So I reduced, but not correctly. I should have said 350 days, 355 days. Because I'm talking in relation to the time when Hazrat Muhammad was instructing him, and they knew the calendar by the lunar calendar, not the lunar, but the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar. Anyway, small thing. What he said was the year should be divided into 24-hour day sections, and each section should be attended according to the Islamic instructions. Now this automatically resolves so many other questions about the fasting, about the prayers. Now if you have to divide the day into 5 prayers, time prayers, then according to the normal days, you have to fix, let's say, not fix, but carve out a portion of the 24-hour day into a daytime, and the second into the night time. This also brings to light the question of what he meant by 1 year day. When he said a day would be as long as full 1 year, what he meant was including the night and the day, because he was talking of 24 hours day.
Right.
Right?
I see.
So that means 6 months night and 6 months day, according to the relations of day and night to the appearance or disappearance of sun. So this is exactly what happens at the point of North Pole. So also it happens at the point of South Pole. There, 6 months night and 6 months day follow each other. So, and in between, as he has explained, the days would vary. So as you go close to the North or South Pole.
But at the North and South Pole,
Yes.
and they carved out this time and said, right, this is when we're going to do morning prayers and evening prayers, and that sets our time. Approaching the pole, when you do have the sun, you know, like say 500, 600 miles away, there will be a time when it'll be a tremendously long
that
day.
also is a subject which I discussed during my sermon on Friday.
I'll send him the tape of it.
It's a very, very interesting answer which Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave, because it relates to the signs by which normal days are measured to disappear. This is the basic message.
Right.
When those signs by which we measure the normal days disappear, then the right of people there to judge, to decide, I mean not decide, but to divide the 24 hours into days and nights begins to operate. Now, in case you are approaching the North Pole, although the day may still be 24 hours day, but according to the Quranic signs, they will not be applicable during, say, between many latitude situated in a certain in certain closeness to the North Pole. For instance, if the night is reduced to 4 hours, the dawn would lengthen so much,
Yeah.
so also the dusk, that they would join each other. And I have seen it myself.
Yeah.
When we went to the North Pole, no, not North Pole, but North Cape in Norway, we experienced all these various, changing pattern of days and nights. What happened was, at times we found that although the sun set and sun rose, yet there is no separating line between the evening dusk and the morning dawn. And the Holy Quran, speaking of our fasting as well as speaking of the prayers, describes the time with relation to the sun and the dusks and the position of sun, and after what happens after the sun is set, right? So when the conditions disappear,
What to do? Yeah.
then you are given the right
Right.
to judge for yourself. So the secret lies in his word normal days.
Right.
What he said was, judge according to the normal days. In normal days, the signs of the Quran are applicable. And when they are no longer applicable, then there begins the period of abnormal days.
Right. Thank you.
Please.
Well, it's a subject that you've discussed previously. It's about black holes.
That's right.
I know there's a lot of controversy about the exact nature of them, but we know that black holes absorb light. But as everything has a negative and a positive image, could there be such things as white holes which emanate light in the same way as black holes absorb light?
This is the white hole in which we are breathing and living, because the sun is radiating light. See, but what you are talking about perhaps is something else, and that is something which creates a very intriguing possibility. If the black hole absorbs matter as such, there is matter and antimatter. And some scientists believe that the mass of matter is exactly the same as the mass of antimatter. as long as they are kept apart at safe distances, they remain, in existence. When they are brought together, they disappear into nothingness. So this is what may have happened what may ultimately happen in the black hole. The black hole cannot attract masses from such long distances as hundreds of thousands of years of light. Hundreds of thousands of years, light years. Yet it does. When it grows extremely powerful, it engulfs, it swallows everything, even at meteoric distances like many million years away. That is how ultimately the black hole, which would appear at the end of the time, will have everything swallowed and dissolved into it. That can only happen if its gravitational pull is out of proportion, bigger and more powerful than the planets around. The bigger it grows, the more it eats, the more gigantic it becomes. So a dwarfish giant is born out of the black hole, which begins its journey by eating and consuming the things around at short distances. Then as it grows larger and smaller, larger in strength and smaller in size, it feeds upon itself. It preys upon even such distant stars to which it cannot reach before. So that is how the vacuum around is, bigger and bigger vacuum is created. And anything which just passes through is immediately pulled into it. Now this can happen if there is enough mass within the black hole, whether we see it or not. Because without mass, it could not attract anything. Now the question which arises and which I am pointing out is that if it also absorbs antimatter, then the moment it begins to absorb, the matter within should be negated and equated so completely that it should disappear.
Right.
You see?
It loses its power as
That's
well.
right. So the black hole should begin to melt away the moment it begins to suck the antimatter as well. And ultimately what we knew as universe would be an equation of 0 is equal to 0. No more. And that is another very important issue which has to be discussed, and scientists are taking it up, as to whether creation can be made out of nothing, out of nothingness. Now my concept of creation is that the secret lies in the poles, in the opposite number. And some scientists have already succeeded in creating some subatomic, extremely minute particles which have no mass, out of nothing, just by creating poles.
Have no mass.
No mass. The poles are created, and with the pole they come into being.
The only way you can see them is by electric charge, isn't it?
Well, electric charge is a very, very crude term to be applied to that. I'm talking of such minute things which can only be reached through mathematics, not through any electronic or other means. You work it out mathematically and you know that it must have happened, it has happened. Otherwise it's impossible. So what I'm talking about is that about black hole there's some very intriguing possibilities which are developing and are being discussed by the scientists. One is this, not this, but the others, this is mine. That maybe now we understand the process of creation. The will of God creates two ends, and the sum total of the two ends remains zero. See?
Cancel each other out.
Both show physical forms of existence, but they're just the will of God manifested in a way that they take the physical form while the zero remains zero. Outside God there is nothing but zero. So you bring them together, fuse them together, and they vanish. So similarly, maybe either the black hole itself begins to dissolve and diminish gradually, become smaller and smaller gradually by absorbing antimatter as well. Or maybe there are two types of black holes, some made of antimatter and some of matter, and they are kept at a distance. And if God desires to bring everything to the naught, absolute naught, then they permit it to come back, to fuse together. But there are other interesting possibilities which are really being discussed through the imagination of more dimensions. We know 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, but scientists are mathematically producing the possibilities, logical possibilities of creating more dimensions. Even they have worked up to 14 dimensions. It's absolutely mind-boggling to conceive that 14-dimension thing. But with mathematics, no problem. On the white paper and with a pencil, you can do things. So, if they now, the point which I want to raise is specifically this. Some mathematicians who worked on these possibilities, they believe that it is just possible that the black hole is just really a hole to a new world, opening into a new sort of universe with different dimensions. So they sink here and rise there, like the sun sets here and rises at another place. So there is no nothingness according to them. It's only a change of form of dimensions. So this universe which sinks here appears in a new form, in new dimensions, in the same space, not in a different space. But the whole is so complicated for ordinary mind to imagine that one can't conceive how can it happen that in the same space it sinks and reappears. But they point out that change the dimensions and things disappear to you.
A parallel universe.
A parallel universe in the same place. What we know as space or time space. Exactly in the same time space with new dimensions a new creation is made. So one finishes and the other appears. This is only the scientific game. They enjoy their mathematical games and this and that. The Holy Quran is very specific on this. It does not support this view. The Holy Quran says that when Allah wills, Allah brings the matter close like wrapping up a sheet of paper around one's hand. And everything, the whole universe will be wrapped up around Allah's hand. The words hands are used, but the meaning is of course not the hand like mine. So everything is wrapped up and disappears. Like we created for and this is a process, God says, which would be repeated again and again. Like we created the universe for the first time, we shall recreate it after bringing it to nothingness. And the manner in which the way it is brought to nothingness is exactly the picture of black hole information. Now, this is the most intriguing part. One is amazed at the Quranic description. The like of it is not found in any other divine book. Impossible. Search far and wide. These are the statements which stand out in their uniqueness. And the reason is that this was the book which had to remain operative till the end of the time. So all that man had discovered or man had developed enough to perceive had to be somehow mentioned in the Quran, otherwise people would say it's a book of the past. So this is the issue which I am discussing, which proves that the Holy Quran is not a book of the past. It is still valid and will continue to remain valid, because the other things, references which I can't understand as present, and I know they have to be understood later on by the man of the future. So this is one of the things which we do understand now. The Holy Quran says that a time would come when matfiyatum biyaminihi, because the whole universe would be wound round on the right hand. Then it says that we will pack it up katayyi sijilli lil kutub, like the scribes of old used to pack up all they had written on, all their scrolls, and finish them. Then it says that the universe, the Holy Quran says at another place, the universe was shut like a ball. Nothing escaped it. Kanata ratqan. The heavens and the earth were just one small packed up ball, which as if was sewn around in a manner that nothing could escape from it. And then it says, فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, we rent them asunder and created both heaven and earth by that act of breaking it open. Now, show me anywhere in the world where any philosopher or any religious book had mentioned such a thing. Now, this is exactly the Big Bang description which we read in the scientific books, and in physics in particular. What branch of physics is that called? Which is
particle physics?
Huh?
Particle physics?
No.
Oh.
This black hole and geophysics? No.
Astrophysics.
Astrophysics. Maybe, yes, that's right. So the image of black hole which we have learned from them is exactly that. It shuts everything, closes everything, nothing can escape. Then God would break it open, is the verdict of the Quran. And then another verdict is that everything was like smoke, and then we condensed it, and out of that smoke were born the heavens and the earth. Now this is the second phase after the Big Bang. You see, the gaseous state which appears, which follows the Big Bang, is also described by the Quran. So that was the last verse which I quoted first. How will it come to an end again? Now, according to the scientists, when the accretion from the space around begins to fall or being pulled by the immense gravitational pull of the black hole, it begins to approach the speed of light. And because no matter can reach the speed of light, or if it becomes closer, cannot retain its form as it has, so grotesque things begin to happen. And according to the scientists, as it gets closer, it becomes pressed into a sheet. Imagine the Quranic description and the description of the scientist. What happens as the matter approaches the black hole? And they say it gets compressed into sheet-like things. And because the black hole is revolving, so as it disappears into the black hole, before that it gets wrapped round. That's all we know. What happens later on, nobody knows. Now this description of the Quran is so precise, so precisely applicable to what the scientists have discovered, that if there is no other proof of the existence of God, this should be enough. Unthinkable for a man of that age, however educated he might have been, to think in these terms of the universe beginning and the ending and so on and so forth. While the Prophet who told us these things was one of the illiterate, according to the Quran. While the sum total of the whole educated world, mankind of that period, could not have conceived together this thing. It's impossible. Yet a man from the desert of Arabia gets up and says, I am being told by God this and that, and he himself perhaps cannot fully comprehend. Allah knows best, but he knows this is the word of God. And strange it is that nobody raised questions and eyebrows as to what this meant. They thought maybe it would happen one day, like this thing, the resurrection would take place, but before the resurrection, doomsday would take place. But how could they interpret these verses together in relation to each other? Because the concept of the people at the time of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was that once the doomsday occurs, then we go to another world, and that world is indestructible. It never repeats itself. And according to the Holy Quran, this is the image, this is the clear picture given. But why did they not wonder as to what the Quran was saying here? It said we go on destroying and repeating. So obviously this applied to the physical existence of the universe the Holy Quran was talking about. Because the hereafter is a different thing. According to the Holy Quran, we can't even imagine what forms and what shapes will take or will be given to us after we open up our eyes in the new world. So they are two different things. But Allah did not permit them to even think of such objections against this statement, because this statement is so enlightening today but was so objectionable at the time of its revelation. So this is also a miracle that nobody thought of it, nobody understood, nobody said, all right, things beyond us, let's forget about it. Right?
Thank you very much.
Please.
Euthanasia is becoming a very important discussion for debate
That's
nowadays. Do you think there's ever any justification for euthanasia?
You see, according to the Holy Quran, life is not our possession. We do not own life. And the sanctity of life is so important that temporary stray suffering must not be permitted to interfere with the inviolable principle of sanctity of life. So if once you begin to give right to people to take either their own life on the excuse that they are suffering, or to take somebody else's life, because that person is suffering and says, all right, you can take my life. Once it begins, there will be no end to it. Then other things will follow. And all the sanctity of the life we fully, strictly impose here in our laws, man-made laws as well, will go overboard. It will be, result in chaos. The question is, suffering can be relieved to a degree by man through through drugs and other things. If you can't relieve a person beyond that, then suffering is a means of bringing death. Now, let God do it by His law. A few moments more or a few moments less do not matter as compared to the price you have to pay once you begin to take decisions into your own hands. So if the suffering increases, that suffering also causes unconsciousness, because the threshold of different people is different. So in some cases it doesn't happen so quickly as you expect, or doesn't happen as quickly as in some other people's cases. So this is again another dilemma. The problem we face doesn't seem to have any solution, because people's threshold of suffering, or tolerance of suffering changes. Some people at the slightest pain, they kick a shindy about it and say, raise the whole,
raise the roof.
Yes, right. They raise the roof. In Urdu we say to raise the heavens. So
we didn't have roofs.
I was undecided between the two. That's why I hesitated. And at least they kick a shindy, if nothing else, if not the roof. While some suffer so patiently, to such a degree, that it's unbelievable. Only when you go through that experience yourself, then you know how the disease was punishing. So it all depends. Now, whom will you permit, at what level? How will you know the inside story? How can you project yourself into the mind of a person and judge really this has gone beyond the normal level of suffering? So we shouldn't interfere in these things.
Also, maybe some people suffer as a result of, this is God punishing them, maybe.
I mean, sometimes suffering is not meant to be pain.
You mean those who watch them, they suffer?
Well, maybe
is it to relieve themselves that they kill the others?
Yeah, maybe.
What I mean to say, there's another angle to it as well.
Sure, yeah.
A mother suffers for the suffering of the child. A son suffers for the suffering of his mother, for instance, or a daughter for the suffering of his father. So maybe the attitude is selfish. They want to put the suffering person at rest to have some rest themselves. And these things have happened in real life, and they have been recorded in the history of legal battles, where some lawyers tried to defend such people because they thought it was done out of mercy for them. But the fact is, it could be the other way around. It could be out of mercy for themselves. They wanted to get rid of this nuisance.
Yeah.
So things become further complicated when you start to look at it from the other angle as well.
I know, there's a gentleman at work, and his mother basically had died, but there was a brain form, so that for them they couldn't bury their mother because she still passed one of the 6
but
criteria.
this is not the same question. Her question was different.
This is my question.
This is your question, yes. I know that. But what decisions I have been giving, because I have been repeatedly asked by Ahmadis for advice in such cases, I tell them that what you call clinical death is a terminology of science, and what you call mental death is also another term of science. Now, when you inquire from these people, the doctors who know, when you say the brain is dead, what would happen if you take the machines off or remove the patients from under the machines? They would tell you that it is more likely that he would die. But sometimes he continues to live a vegetable life. which is not really the life as we know it, because he can't think, he can't sense, he can't suffer, he can't have any joy, any happiness, so he's practically dead. Now, in view of these two different situations, I tell them that if the machine is removed and the patient lives, then you have no right to kill it.
Right.
On the excuse that it's just a vegetative life. Allah knows best, we don't know. But life, whether vegetative or zoological, still has its sanctity and you not permitted to touch. But maybe the suffering of those who live and who are close to the person is caused by them themselves, by a wrong system. Why in the first place was this patient's life dragged out while under normal situation he could not survive? So when you become over much fussy, then these things happen.
Right.
In England here, in London, there was an Ahmadi whose wife suffered from some stroke and the brain ceased to function. Now my ordinary advice is to give them some homeopathies or other drugs from any system of cure which claim that something can happen. But don't put such patients on machine, because that would be dragging them out, that would not be doing them any good whatsoever. Even if they survive with some deficiencies, some permanent damages. Some cannot speak, some cannot see, some cannot move themselves, they can't eat anything. You have to do everything mechanically for them on their behalf. Somebody else should live on their behalf and do the functions which the patient normally does himself. So this is the complication. So I tell Ahmadis to behave, to know where to submit.
Yeah.
See, this is the decision. Shall we submit to the will of Allah here and take only the normal measures to save the patient, not beyond? But some, out of sentiments, etc., they say, all right, and they're also overawed by the new system, new machine and things. And they say, doctors say, let's put the patient under the machine. Okay. They do it, and after keeping the patient alive for a month or so, because of the extra expenditure involved, because of the shortage, of the availability of such machines and so on, they begin to advise you then. We think enough is enough, you better book your patient. So the life or death is decided by the doctors without any rhyme or reason. Why? So what the worst part of this is, in one case I had been insisting, please remove the machine because it's too long and I think it's not fair to the patient herself. And when they removed, she still continued to live. This automatic, breathing apparatus was working and there was no other sign of life. Whenever the brain was charted, they said, dead straight line, no ups and downs. So man is creating suffering for himself. The principle involved is do not try to fight with the decree of Allah. You will never be able to defeat it. Right?
Thank you.
Yes. Please, Muzaffar.
Do you have another question?
Yes, I'd like to know whether that extends to now at London hospitals. They're operating on babies before they've been born to correct defects in order to enable them to survive. Right. Does that extend to operating on these children before birth? Do you feel that that's interfering as well?
You see, operation before birth is, I don't think we have we can have any religious objection or moral objections against that, because the principle by which I am always guided is, are you helping the plan of God? You are moving in the direction of the plan of things, or you are opposing it, moving in the opposite direction. So, for instance, if genetical engineering is employed to improve the quality of the life God has created, it should not be religiously objectionable, because you are moving along the winds, along the plan of things. If you try to create new animals out of the created animals and distort their images for gaining some purposes you think would be useful for humanity, that will be going against the grain, because He is the creator. He has created balances, and we do not in fact realize the importance of even the smallest thing that lives in the ecosystem that we know. Everything plays its role, and man has repeatedly discovered, unfortunately too late for him, that whenever an attempt was made to change the environments and the ecosystem, would you say eco or ecosystem? Eco, I think.
Doesn't matter.
Huh?
That's fine. That's
Echo
fine.
is different, Echo is reverberation of the sound you hear when it strikes against something and returns to you. But ecosystem, I think it is, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. So in Australia, some experiments were carried out. Not experiments, but some attempts were made to get rid of certain animals. And as they got rid of those animals, they had to go through a chain or a procession of problems, born one out of the other, and they could not bring under control the things which were unleashed, and they released suddenly, out completely beyond their imagination. If certain, for instance, rabbits were destroyed, the rabbits fed on certain bushes and grasses, etc. On the same bushes and grasses, some extremely dangerous insects also fed. Now, because the rabbits consumed most of the bushes and the grasses, so the population of those dangerous or insects, etc., was automatically controlled. And some other animals also were kept within their confinement created or imposed by nature. Now you do away with one important factor in the environment, and you sort of open a Pandora's box of problems. Chain of link after link, chains develop which are very difficult to be brought under your control once again. So that is what has happened in Australia, and that also has happened in England sometimes. So that is why the scientists are very, very careful nowadays. There is a fly which causes impetigo and other rashes which are very painful, and you find this fly by the rivers in many lovely areas where the tourists go so often. So to bring it under control was the main problem with the scientists here in England. Now they invented something or discovered a bacteria which could cause fatal diseases in the larvae of these flies. But having learned their lessons, they were extremely careful. In small controlled areas, they experimented with these new bacteria, and they washed every other species of life present in that water what effect it causes upon them, and did not release this into the nature until they were, according to them, 100% certain that it could only create benefit in helping nature, not to work against it. So there's so many things, which one has to bring into focus of attention. Particularly playing with nature is very, very dangerous. In America now, there are many lawsuits against some states who have permitted genetical engineering to attempt to create certain insects which they feel would be beneficial for man, because those who have sued the state are also knowledgeable scientists belonging to this field. They say, and they rightly so, I believe, that according to certain experiments, what we projected did not result in the same thing. The experiment did not result in the same thing which we had projected. This is what I want to say. For instance, they cut off a gene from I think it was a mouse or something, anyway, some animal, small animal, and planted that gene upon an insect to change its characters, so that instead of being harmful, it would become a useful animal. Now, when they were horrified to detect that, according to the mathematical calculations, what should have resulted did not result. A new thing was born, as if, through mutation, something had suddenly appeared which they had not calculated upon. They were not expecting, So they say this is a very dangerous game. A gene within a set of genes, placed in a certain position in a chromosome, may behave in a certain manner because its effects are also inhibited or influenced by the genes around. So in a certain setup it works. How can you be sure that when planted upon an other chromosome in a certain order, because order is also, as you know, very important. If the order is changed, the life can completely come to a halt, because the chromosomes then would not live and cannot function if you change the orders improperly. They're sequenced by nature, by God, as we believe. So the question arises as to whether these genes had a permanent quality, an individual confined quality, which they could carry along with them wherever planted, or will the genes should the genes to be taken as possessing certain qualities in a given circumstances, in a given environment. Now this incident which I have just quoted proves the fact, as I also have always held this, that genes should not be taken to have totally independent characters. Their qualities, their characters are defined in that given situation of the cell in which they are attached and placed in a certain order along a thread of chromosome, and if you remove it, maybe something else develops, and it has developed. And this is why this is one scientific line of future with relation to the time of Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which has been roundly condemned by the Holy Quran. Holy Quran speaks of so many prophecies of scientific achievements of man and new creations and this and that, and never you find any reflection upon that. It is if not recommended, it's just plain statement, neutral statement that and that is going to happen in the future. When you come to this, The Holy Quran says Satan would coax them on to do this, and they would be punished. So when the creation of God is changed, the bell begins to ring. You have gone perhaps too far, stepped out of your boundaries. So this is, I think, in answer to your question, this should satisfy, is that right?
Yes.
I have one last question if we have time.
Achha.
Do we, or?
1 minute, please continue.
Right, the question I've got is that the America and CIA and all these agencies, they've always had like a budget to go and cause problems in Chile or problems
Everywhere in the world.
Everywhere. They go and get the big wooden spoon out and stir it up.
That's right.
Do we as a Jamaat have, as we inshallah become more and more successful, do we have anything to worry about these agencies coming in and stirring trouble in with us?
As long as they do not cross your path, let them do whatever they are.
Let them waste their own money on.
Because we don't have enough money to waste on them. Pursuing them, for that you need billions of dollars. So let them function as they please. Only by way of advice, we must keep such people, such big powers warned, and well warned in advance, that you're playing with the peace of the rest of the world in the name of intelligence is not proper. It is not moral. It is not permitted to you. The right is not granted to you by God. So don't play God. If you go on playing with the peace of others in the name of your interests, you see, this is it.
Oh, it's, yeah.
And where you judge yourself as to which lines to cross and which not to, which later on, when discovered, your own people condemn as wrong. What sort of game is it that you're playing? I have read books of the people involved with CIA at very highest level, written by them. And the secrets they unfold, they reveal, it's horrifying, because they're living a life of hypocrisy. Man as a whole is living a life of hypocrisy. The same thing is good judging by one yardstick and is bad judging by another yardstick, and there are hundreds of thousands of yardsticks nowadays, unfortunately, right?
Yes.
The time flies past like this, it's unbelievable. During my 1 hour of question and answers, every time I found this, as we begin to warm up, the time is over.
Maybe the time will come when 1 hour will become like 1 day, maybe we'll have 6 months.
I hope not. Not with my sessions, please.
No.
I'm so comfortable with this plan of things, because for me the days are flying past, but when I have no work, even for a few minutes, time seems to suspend, along with me. It's so boring. So I consider myself very fortunate.
MashaAllah. Yeah, that's right.
And I try to keep others busy around me. Right? Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
MTA International, reaching the corners of the earth.